Hey everyone, welcome back to Hobbies with Jose. I'm Jose Carbajal. Today we've got part 3 of our Polar Lights 1/1000 scale USS Enterprise. Let's go. Thanks for joining me again, everyone. It's great to have you back. Now we're getting really close to being able to add the LED lights and start assembling the piece. But before we can do that, there's a couple of other details we need to paint first, starting with the deflector dish. And for this, I will be using Testor's enamel paint in gold. And I'll be adding a drop of enamel thinner to the paint. While we wait for that piece to dry so I can give it a second coat, I'm going to work on the shuttle bay doors for a bit and paint in the landing light. So for that, I'll be using Tamiya acrylic paints X25 clear green and X27 clear red. That should literally be enough. And just one drop of acrylic thinner. That might be a little hard to see on camera, but I'll keep adding a few more coats just to darken it up a bit. But so far it's looking pretty good. Alright, I'll keep working on those two pieces off camera, but next up we're going to work on these two. I'm going to start scraping off the paint that's in the indentation so that we can have the LED light pop through. And this is going to be extremely time consuming, but just looking at the one indentation scraped out, it's looking pretty good so far. And here we are after a half hour of working on this. It's definitely grueling work, and it's not exactly the prettiest. I'm not sure how good it's coming up on camera, but overall it looks decent. What definitely helps is dipping the X-Acto knife into a little bit of enamel thinner and letting the paint soften up a little bit before scraping it off. So this is something that I'm going to keep working on throughout the week off camera, and we'll see how the whole piece comes out. All right, so let's get the engines together into one piece, and I do have the motor here. Unfortunately, the black cable did kind of snap off. It was kind of loose out of the box, but I was able to resolder it together. That's one thing to kind of keep an eye out, and we'll make sure to test the connection before we lock everything into place. But let's go ahead and see how these pieces go. And there is a notch on the bottom of these LED lights here, supposed to match up with the notch on the inside. Takes a little bit of doing, nothing too tricky though. Now this little piece connects to the motor, and that's what makes the bussard spin. So I'm going to glue it in there, but I'm going to be careful as to not glue it into the LED section. And then we have the cover that's going to go over the tube. This isn't going to get glued in, but we just want to make sure and match the notch onto the gray piece here. Just like that. And the bussard clear piece is going to fit tightly onto the tube. Let's go ahead and test it out. And you can see on camera that it is spinning, and the lights are definitely on, so it's working great. I'm going to go ahead and add, I think, some panel line to the clear piece to just add a bit of definition onto the raised sections. Next up, we're going to connect some of the clear pieces onto the warp engines. This tiny piece, number 110, looks like it just gets sandwiched in between the two halves. Just like that. And next we have piece number 109. Has a little dot on this corner here, which they want you to match up with the dot that's on the bottom section here. And that one fits in nice and tight. Next up we have part 108, and it's going to fit right into this little notch here. This one might need a little bit of glue. Feels pretty loose on there. And onto the other half of the nacelle, we're going to be adding the clear blue piece onto the matching section here. And it does seem to fit in somewhat snug, but I'm going to add a little bit of glue to it. At this point, we're not going to incorporate the motored engines. I'm going to feed the cables into this opening here. And that does fit pretty snug. Once I put the other half, it should be nice and tight into place. We're also going to start incorporating the other LEDs into the engines, so I'm going to feed this other cable into that same hole. And it does take a little bit of doing to make enough room, but it's not impossible. Now these LEDs don't snap into place, so what I'm going to have to do is glue them in one at a time. But before I do that, I want to make sure that the blue lights get diffused. So I'm going to add a couple of sheets of vellum paper that I had for the Falcon, just to help diffuse that light. So we now have all of the LEDs glued into place. And before we connect the other half, we want to snap on the clear red dome that goes in the front. And that does fit nice and tight. Let's go ahead and take it for a test spin. And you can definitely hear the engines, but you can see the bussard spinning on the inside, which looks really cool. And the blue lights on the side don't fill the entire blue section completely, but they have a nice spread with the vellum paper that we inserted. But overall, it looks fantastic. So I did go ahead and just pop on the back section real quick, and you can see the parts that I scraped off, those little indentations. They look pretty good, not too bad. There is a bit of light bleed where the sections meet though, which I think I'm okay with as long as the piece itself doesn't have any light bleed. But that's what it's gonna more or less look like. Last thing I'm gonna do today is connect the pylons onto the engine, and I'm just gonna make sure and feed the cables into the provided channel here, which looks like it's going to be a very tight fit. But we should be okay. I just want to try and lay them as flat as possible here. And there's what we have so far. It's definitely a very tight fit for the pylons, and I'm gonna have to clean up some sections that got some glue on them. Thank you all so much for joining me, and I'll see you next week. Take care, everyone.